there, people. This is Casey from Below Average Gaming Show, and today we're going to talk about replayability. You see, because I see the word replay value be spread around about certain games or have that label put on them, and I don't think it's true for every game that word is used for. A lot of games are labeled as replayable or has a lot of replayability or has replay value, but I don't think that necessarily really fits that. And so the question is, what does replayability really even mean, though? I mean, some of you may say, like, well, Casey, it's obvious. It just means you're playing the game again. And I say, well, that's part of it, sure, but a lot of these games that are labeled as replayable, you're not really doing that. Now let me explain. For example, let's say you have a game that has multiple endings, or it has decision making that are really big, branching quests or storylines, characters that you decide who lives or dies or follows you around, etc. Your first time through, you make those decisions, or you do the things that qualify you for certain endings, and you play that, and then that's the ending you got. That's how your game just turned out or whatever, and it was fine. But then you go through it again to see the new ending or to see the new quest if you choose certain decisions. For example, a game off the top of my head is Dragon Age Origins. That game's decision making is huge. It has a huge impact on the game. I mean, there's a decision whether or not to let a certain guy live or die. And if you choose to spare him, you lose a party character, and it opens up new decisions for you later on that you otherwise would not have. Also, choosing your race, your sex, and your social class also greatly affects your starting experience to that game. I mean, if you pick a human noble, your first few quests as your backstory as being a human noble are going to make the game replayable. Is that replaying the game if for example one playthrough you choose to play as a human noble who spares the dude at the end of the game versus you playing as the elf peasant who doesn't spare the guy at the end of the game? Is that replaying the game? Does that make the game replayable? In my opinion, because you're experiencing something new. You are technically playing something that is not the same as the game you played before. Because the game you're playing now has different options, different experiences that are happening to you, and it's not the same as the one you played before. For me, replayability means that experience you had before was so awesome that you are having it again because you just enjoyed it that much. Now, can those decisions and multiple endings and things such as that add replay value? Well, sure they can. But at the end of the day, if you're just playing the game just to see the new ending, but you're not playing it because of the game that you already experienced, then I don't think the game has replay value, in my experience. I think that's artificial replay value. But true replay value would be that the game that you've already experienced is so great, so awesome, so amazing, so fantastical that you just have to, need to experience it again. And let me give you a for example. Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time is one of my favorite games. It's one of the first RPGs I've ever played, and I loved it. I loved that game. I would play it over and over again just to fight the bosses. I love that game so much. And there's just nothing like pulling the sword out of the pedestal for the first time. And then the amazing twist when you get turned into an adult and you're like, oh man, I'm an adult. I can do things now. I can use bows and I can use a giant sword and I can kill Ganondorf and all this other cool stuff. And there was just nothing like it. It was awesome and an amazing experience. And so I wanted to experience it again. And so that's what I did, is I experienced it again and again and again. I didn't play for a certain ending. I didn't play to see a new character. I played to see the same ending. I played to see the same characters because I loved them all and I wanted to experience them again. And to me, that's what replayability is seeing the same thing again. Now, there is one game that is very popular right now, and a lot of people are saying how much they love it and everything, but for me, I look at that game and I say it has no replayability. But because it has so many different endings and your decision in that game matters so much, people are deciding to just follow that game and love it and play it over and over again to see those new endings and those new experiences. And I don't think that's replayability. And the game I'm talking about is Undertale. Torches, I will say that Undertale's story is pretty interesting. I have seen some of the endings to that game, and they are, even as someone who didn't play the game, who has no background with that game, um, those endings still got to me and still made me go, oh, that's sweet, or oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. So I'm not talking bad about that part of the game. But if you've played the game, are you seriously going to sit there and tell me that the combat is awesome and that you just want to have that combat over and over and over again? Because after a little while, it gets boring. Sure, you can talk your way through some monster, or through all the monsters actually, but eventually you start hearing the same thing over and over again, and because it's comedy, comedy gets old. Or if you're doing a genocide run, killing the monsters over and over again, running through all the rooms, just waiting for the monsters to randomly spawn and attack you in old style, Final Fantasy style, it's old. That stuff is old and outdated, and it's boring. And for me, I've never heard anybody say they're going back to play Undertale because of the combat, because of the actual gameplay itself. They're going back to see the new endings. They're going back to see how the characters react to you when you've done a genocidal run versus a pacifist run. That's not replaying, in my opinion. Because you're playing something new. You're playing a different game. I mean, you literally are almost, in effect, playing a completely different game in the case of Undertale. Because with Undertale, if you're doing a pacifist run versus a genocide run, those gameplays are completely different. With a genocide run, to my knowledge, you have to kill every single monster in every single room, and it is a pain. And with a pacifist run, you're sparing all the monsters, just talking to them. Those are completely two different ways of playing the game. And so in my opinion, that's not replaying it, because you're playing something new. Now, the question comes up is, what about really big games? You know, Fallout 4 is coming up, and I am gonna just disappear from the face of the earth for about 7 years, guys, when that comes out. So goodbye. The end of the channel is near. What about games like that? Do those have replayability? Because sometimes you just play them and then you start a new character and you run into new quests and stuff. Is that replaying it? And I would say that when you're replaying something, even in these games I've been talking about with decision making, things like that, that there is some overlap. There are parts of the game that you are genuinely replaying, even in games where there is decision making. But what about whenever these experiences aren't being changed, but they're being added onto? Is that different? I would almost say that maybe a little bit of yes and a little bit of no. Yes, it's replayable because you are replaying some of the games. You know, I've played New Vegas countless times, and 3 of those times I decided to become the overlord of New Vegas with my robot minions. But each one of those experiences was a little bit different. But the big difference is that when you're adding, you're not taking away. With these other games, you are changing something. With these games, like Fallout and Skyrim and stuff like that, with big open worlds and tons of quests that you could never find in one play or in one character, that it isn't necessarily replaying it, but it's not necessarily not replaying it either. And it's almost like maybe you shouldn't consider it replaying that game, maybe you should consider it still playing that game, but with a new character. And maybe that's how we should see all these other games too. Maybe we should see it as I'm playing Undertale still. I'm not playing Undertale again to see a different ending. No, I've played Undertale enough to see one ending, and I'm still playing it to see another. So those have just been some of my thoughts on this issue. Namely that replayability does not mean you are playing a game again in order to get a new experience. Replayability, to me, means that you are playing a game again to experience the same experience that you had before. Because it was just that awesome that you needed to feel it, to see it, and experience it again. So guys, please leave your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you had a happy Halloween, and I'll see you later.